Let's face it, for a very long time, fans were rooting for the relationship between Elliot Stabler and Olivia Benson. Before shipping them even had a term, it was what fans did with these two incredible characters on Law & Order SVU. It just shows how incredible Mariska Hargitay and Christopher Meloni played these characters. Today, we're going to check out some of the most memorable moments between them. Warning, spoilers ahead. First up, when Olivia gets stalked. Let's start at the very beginning. Right when the partners were just starting to win our hearts, it was all the way back in season 1 of SVU when Olivia faces her first stalker. The guy murdered the assistant district attorney who had prosecuted him, and then he becomes obsessed with Olivia. He follows her and sends her flowers to work and even gives her middle of the night calls. All the trimmings of a creepy stalker. This whole situation makes Elliot's protective instinct kick into overdrive. He drives far out of his way just to pick up Olivia to and from work so that she isn't alone, and he makes sure she's safe inside her home before he leaves her there. They even drink out of the same glass of orange juice, hinting that they are way more than just colleagues. This was the first time the partners actually really seemed to build a relationship outside of work, where they really became friends and made all of our hearts skip a beat. It showed how much Elliot cared and how far he would go to protect her. A memorable moment for sure. Next, swinging in Bombshell. Another fan favorite moment that many of us will always remember happened a little more recently in season 12 when the partners were forced to go undercover at a swingers club. Anytime the two have had to go undercover as a couple had been really memorable, and this time was no different. Honestly, nothing steamy happened and they're just doing their job, but who can ever forget the moment where Elliot introduced Olivia to his wife? It made us all lose our minds just a little bit. Now we have one of the sweetest moments in Quarry. Right throughout the entire series, many of Olivia's insecurities come from the fact that she is a product of rape. Her genes are a big issue for her, since, as she puts it, half of her genes come from a drunk and the other half from someone who is violent and cruel. It gives her a blind spot at times, but generally makes her a better detective. During the investigation in the episode Quarry in season 6, one murder suspect's backstory hits a little too close to home for Olivia. The man was a victim that was molested by his father and then a suspect in his father's murder. After he was cleared, he shared that he had always been scared to have children because of his genes. This upsets Olivia, and she later shares her fears with Elliot, who comforts her. He says that she turned out great and that isn't always about genes. The sweet moment between the partners is one that got many fans choked up and that they will never forget. Next, a boy's death in Fault. This was probably one of the worst moments in the series, but still so incredibly memorable that it has to be on the list. Many cop shows always warn about partners who get too attached to each other and who are more focused on their partner's safety than catching the bad guy. But this episode was a great way of showing the dangers in that. It was a massive moment between the characters and one that was completely heartbreaking. The suspect, who was played by Lou Diamond Phillips, had kidnapped some children. The team tracks the suspect and the children, and Elliot is close to saving the boy when the bad guy comes up behind Olivia and slits her throat. Who could forget the look on Elliot's face when he thought he just saw one of his best friends killed right in front of him? It was horrible and sent him off course. Instead of grabbing the boy, he runs to Olivia, who is clutching her neck, but whose wound is not deep. In the meantime, the suspect takes the kids, and very quickly, the boy is dead. It was a horrible moment for both of them. Later, Olivia also refuses to shoot the kidnapper when it would put Elliot's life at risk. Luckily, a sharpshooter comes in and saves the day. They both realize that they chose each other over the job, and it leads to them getting different partners for a while. Next on our list, that hug in Paternity. If you're a longtime fan of SVU, then you probably already know exactly which hug I'm referring to. This episode was hard to watch, and the entire episode lives in my brain rent-free, but the hug was the moment that made it all worthwhile. Elliot's wife, Kathy, was pregnant with the couple's 5th child at the time, and he was in a case that took him far away. Olivia offers to take Kathy Kathy to the doctor for a routine appointment, but when the two get into a horrible crash, everything goes from routine to nightmare. Kathy is trapped in the car and goes into labor. Olivia helps the medics and to get Kathy hooked up to an IV, and eventually the fire department gets her out. Then, Olivia helps to deliver Kathy's baby, and it is a happy moment, until Kathy flatlines right after delivery. The medics get her back, and everyone ends up being healthy and happy, but the viewers are left exhausted with so many feelings. Still, the writers of the show were not quite done with us, and after Elliot gets to the hospital and checks on his wife, he comes out to grab Olivia and swing her while hugging her in a moment that ended the episode with fans having all the feelings. Can you think of any television partnership that is more iconic than Benson and Stabler? Share them with us in the comments section. We would love to hear from you. Next up, we'll check out some more incredible moments between the partners, including the moment that they reunited after 10 years. Stick with us. Next up, when they get naked in Wildlife. This is one of the funnier scenes on the list. The episode was pretty dark, but this was one light moment between our two favorite partners. Now I have to admit they only end up semi-naked and nothing really happens, but it was still one to remember. Elliot goes undercover in an exotic animal trading ring, and Olivia almost messes up his cover when she shows up to check on him. This leads to the closest we might ever get to the couple actually hooking up. The bosses of the trading ring find out something is going on, and they barge into the house where Elliot and Olivia are. Elliot is just in his underwear, and Olivia is hiding in the bathroom. But then she thinks quickly and comes out in her undies too, acting like she's a call girl. She rubs up against Elliot and tells the other guys that it would be extra if they wanted to join or watch. The bad guys buy it, and they just throw her out of the house instead of killing both cops. The moment lives on in meme form for all of us to enjoy. Now we have the moment when Elliot is willing to risk his house in Perverted. This moment was an incredible example of how much these two cared about each other, but also probably a good example of why Elliot was having marriage problems through the series. During this episode, a rapist that Olivia helped to put away got out of jail and frames her for murder. He was assaulted while in prison and believes that Olivia was behind it all, so he frames her, even putting some of her blood on the murder weapon. With everything pointing to her guilt, Olivia is eventually arrested. A dangerous situation for a cop to be in. Without telling his wife, Elliot takes out a mortgage on their house to pay for Olivia's bail. He then does everything in his power to prove that Olivia is innocent and get the real killer behind bars. They only mentioned him risking his house very briefly, but it was a moment that fans clung to. It shows just how much he cared about his partner and how much he trusted her. Lastly, the conversation in Return of the Prodigal Son. When Elliot left the show without warning, it left fans shocked. And it also left Olivia heartbroken and blindsided. He was the one person she trusted completely, and he walked away without even telling her he was going to himself. Obviously, the reality was that it was things going wrong behind the scenes that led to the character's departure, but it still left Olivia with a massive wound. Then, after 10 years, he returns and they finally get to talk about why he left. He apologizes and explains why he couldn't face her. The entire scene between the two of them is just heartbreaking, and it shows just how much they still care for each other, even after leaving wounds that might never be able to heal completely. It is a great moment of closure, but also so very sad. Are there any other moments you always think of between Benson and Stabler? Let us know. Thanks for watching.